So the director ideally is so focused on their actors and their performances and oblivious to the whirlwind of the choreography that goes on around them with sometimes as many as 80 to 100 people. So the producer's got a 30,000-foot view of the production. The first AD has the boots on the ground right next to the director view of what goes on the production.
This is the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast, helping filmmakers who share a Christian worldview stay in touch, informed, and inspired. Quiet on set. Rolling. Today's host is Geoffrey Whitt.
Hey there, welcome to the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast. I'm Jeff, and today I'm excited to have with us Joth Riggs.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Joth Riggs is an award-winning filmmaker whose career spans more than 30 years on well over 100 movies and TV shows for all the major Hollywood studios. After graduating with a degree in film production, Joth got his start on the set of Pet Sematary II before going on to work on the Universal backlot, then ultimately landing at Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment. After being accepted into the prestigious Directors Guild training program, Joth left Amblin to become a DGA assistant director. After years as a sought-out AD on films such as Starship Troopers and End of Days with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and television series such as CSI and Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, among others, Joth made the move to the director's chair with films like Heartfall and Night of the Sicario, starring Natasha Henstridge, which was released theatrically by Paramount Pictures. Welcome, Joth. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Well, that was quite a bio, and if anyone were to take a look at your IMDb, we can see there's tons of stuff there, but most of our listeners might actually recognize some of your work, such as Jesus Revolution, The Shift, Bringing Back Christmas, Birthright Outlaw, God's Not Dead, Church People. Some of those are some of your more recent projects that you've worked on, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I made a shift about a decade or so ago to more faith and family films, which is why I'm on this podcast.
Yeah, for sure. And some of those are very significant films indeed. I noticed Birthright Outlaw. We had Aaron Burns as a guest a little while back.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Yeah, and Kevin Boren as well. He would have been on that project with you, I believe.
Yeah, that was a great shoot.
So let's go back and tell us how you got started. Where did your love for filmmaking begin?
Well, in my high school church youth group, actually, I was in a band. And being the 80s, our band had to have music videos. And so we made music videos, and I had so much fun making those. I had more fun than I even did in the band. And so we just made a bunch of those and then started making little short films with all the same guys, all my buddies. And I loved it. And I happened to be from Los Angeles. I was in high school at that time. I was in Massachusetts. But given where I was from and given that I always intended to move back there, I knew that I actually had an opportunity to do this as a career. In the 80s, you pretty much had to be in LA or New York. And I actually have a couple of family members in the business. So I know of the business. I knew of it. And I said, hey, man, that's exciting. I want to do that.
Yeah, sometimes having people in the business is
makes it real.
It makes it feel like something you can do.
Attainable.
And for many people, the whole film industry is something that's kind of out of reach. It's, elite or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. So, I'm fortunate just geographically being from that area. And also they did help me because I got an internship on my first feature film.
Okay.
Was from my cousin who was the cinematographer on that film. So, obviously those connections helped. But I worked for free on that project. I worked for almost 3 months with zero income and slept on someone's couch and worked long hours and loved every second.
And learned a lot.
It was an amazing experience. I learned a ton.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also went to film school. And then the last semester of my college experience, I did this internship, and I learned more in 3 months than I learned in 4 years of film school.
Oh, yeah.
By a long shot.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, there's no substitute for actually being on a film set.
That's what I keep hearing over and over. Our guests constantly are giving us wisdom, and that's one of the things they say, just get on a set. No matter what you're learning or where you are in your, whatever stage you are in your learning, spend time on a set.
And one thing I want to mention too is there's a lot of talk in general about people knowing their worth and, don't work for free. Well, you know what? working for free was the best thing I did for my career.
Yeah.
And I think if you're just starting out, yeah, you should be willing to work for free because when you say know your worth, it's like, well, if you have no experience, your worth is zero.
Right.
And so do what you got to do to get on a film set, gain that experience. Then you can go to the next one with some experience, a little something on your resume, and then you can start asking for pay. But be willing to do that.
Yeah, and the other thing to consider is, consider education. And basically, you don't get paid for education. Usually, you pay for it. So if you're getting free education,
that's right. Look at it. Hey, it's free.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, of course, that at the time there was a benefit to having LA as your home. I would say the majority of our listeners don't live in LA. And, tell me, how do you feel about that today?
Oh, totally not necessary anymore.
Uh-huh.
No, it's a different environment now entirely.
Uh-huh.
So, so when I started, it was actual film, 35 millimeter celluloid, shot on Panavision cameras, which are very hard to get a hold of back then.
Uh-huh.
But of course, the barrier to entry now is so low. We shoot on digital cameras. I mean, you can shoot on an iPhone, in high def nowadays. And of course, you don't need to have all the elaborate equipment to edit it. You can edit it on a laptop. And you don't need a distribution deal from a studio. You can upload it to YouTube. So really, there's no excuse. If you're an actual filmmaker and you just want to make films, then you have all the tools necessary at your disposal. You don't have to go to LA or New York. Now, granted, that's a certain level. Obviously,
Correct.
If you want to get to the more professional level, then what you need to do is you need to keep working at those small projects to get good and build your chops and get experience. Then you can start to expand your horizons and look at where films are being made. It's not necessarily everywhere, but it's in a lot of different places. Atlanta, of course, is a huge hub.
Yes.
Tennessee, of course, other countries as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different places. The most important thing isn't where you are. It's, frankly, who you know.
Correct. Yeah.
Because nobody's going to call you if they don't know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really about developing and building what we used to call your Rolodex. It's getting to know people in the business that you can reach out to and that maybe would be willing to bring you on a project.
Yeah. And having people get to know you is, I guess, the key point in that.
Yeah. Now, there's two things. A, it's who you know, but then closely followed in second place is, can you deliver?
Mm-hmm.
Because if somebody's going to go out on a limb because they know you or curry any kind of favor, then you got to back that up by actually doing a great job.
Of course.
Working your tail off.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the internship opportunity that you started with and film school. Which came first?
I went to film school first,
Mm-hmm.
mainly because not because I necessarily thought film school was going to be that valuable, but I just wanted a college degree.
Yeah.
There weren't very many in my family. I was one of the first, so I just wanted that regardless. The other thing is I really wanted to get into the Directors Guild training program, which I can talk about in a moment, but it requires a college degree to even apply. So I knew I couldn't put the cart before the horse. I had to get that degree and might as well be in film. And so me being in school got me access to equipment, which was extremely valuable because, again, that was back in the film days in the early 90s. So I had access to film cameras. It also got me an opportunity to do this internship because it required an internship. And it also fulfilled my requirement to be eligible for the DGA training program.
Mm-hmm. So did you have a lot of projects you worked on in between there from the internship to the time when you entered the DGA program?
Well, right after the internship, I was supposed to do 2 films back to back to fill that whole semester. And the other one pushed, which happens all the time in the film industry. So I actually found myself with a gap year. And I ended up, and I mean, just a quick little side note, my wife, at the time fiance, had one more year of college after me, and we were in Massachusetts. So I had a year before we were going to get married and move to California. And so what I ended up doing is taking a corporate job where I made training videos. So I did that for a year. We got married. We moved out to LA. And then I was fortunate to get a position answering the phone on the stage at Universal for a sitcom. So I got myself on the lot. I got myself in that environment. And then because of my proximity at that time, I was in a position to hear about an opening at Amblin Entertainment, which was also on the Universal backlot. So I was fortunate to get that position at Amblin. And then while working at Amblin, I took the exams to get into the DGA training program and was accepted. So I left Amblin and joined the DGA and became an assistant director.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about, we're going to get more into this in the second part of our interview, but tell us a little bit about your role and your jobs as an assistant director and how that led to or added to your career as it leads to becoming a director.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of people assume that an assistant director is sort of a stepping stone toward directing.
I kind of just implied that, didn't I?
Well, I mean, everybody does. I mean, even it's built into the title.
Right.
To be honest with you, an assistant director should probably be called an assistant producer
Okay.
because it's more about logistics and planning than it is the creative. Really, an assistant director, particularly the first assistant director, who is the head of that department, is responsible for all the little nuance and things on set that a director should frankly never have to think about. All of the planning and preparation that goes into getting what they need, which are making sure the crew knows where to be, when to be, what they're shooting, what they're shooting next, who needs to be in that scene, what actors need to be in that scene, when they need to come in and get ready, what props need to be ready, what effects, what stunts. All of those elements are, I mean, it's a myriad of things that all have to come together for the director to call action. And the director should be focusing on the visuals and, most importantly, the performances. So the director ideally is so focused on their actors and their performances and oblivious to the whirlwind of the choreography that goes on around them with sometimes as many as 80 to 100 people. But that's also overarching what the producer is responsible for at the higher level. So the producer's got a 30,000-foot view of the production. The first AD has the boots on the ground right next to the director view of what goes on the production.
Mm-hmm.
So the first ADs are the ones calling the shots. The first ADs are the ones managing and controlling the set, keeping it efficient, making sure, that we're on schedule. Also, the first AD is responsible primarily for safety and just to make sure that it's as smooth a running set as possible and that ultimately the director gets everything that they're hoping for.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot that goes into that.
Taking care of all of those logistics so that the director just doesn't have to think about them.
Yeah. And, given that I've worked on really big, highly professional studio sets, also really small, low budget kind of amateur sets, I have seen how it should be done in the most efficient manner, and B, some of the things that don't work. I've seen smaller crews or less experienced crews that make mistakes that cost them. So one example of that is on an amateur set, a lot of people tend to go to the director with every question they have.
Right.
And they assume the director is, I'm here to work for the director. Yes, technically everybody on the crew works for the director. But that doesn't mean they all answer directly to the director because then the director can't focus on the performance. And so the AD really should field a lot of those kind of questions. The director ideally is only having to deal with creative choices in a perfect world.
Right.
And so all of the myriad of other questions that come up really should get filtered through the first AD, if not the production manager or the producer.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more about the transition and the differences between, again, those very large studio sets and an independent set. How much of it is transferable? How much is different?
Well, so there's a couple of things. On a low budget set, they tend to be smaller crews, obviously. So you do tend to have to take on more. The expression of wearing many hats is not uncommon at all on a smaller project. As you get onto the bigger projects, not only do you not have to wear many hats, you really need to not wear many hats. You need to focus on what your specialty is. And in some cases, that can feel a little silly. For example, if you're standing right next to a cable plugged into a wall that needs to get unplugged, doesn't it seem to make sense that you can just reach down and unplug it? But what you don't realize is the bigger picture. You don't necessarily know, is that plugged into house power? Is that plugged into a tow plant generator? Will that cause a surge in the system? Is something else plugged into that could cause a problem? You don't know that, and it could cause problems. So when you're on a $200 million movie, that can be a very costly mistake if you were to unplug the wrong thing. And so there are specialists, there are electricians in the union, and that is their entire world, right? They know more about amps and surges than anybody else. And so you stay in your lane. Now, it's a little annoying when you're on a small project and you're like, oh, but it'll just take me a second. But when you get to the bigger projects and, the details are just immense, it's really great when people know their job so well. They know it better than anyone in every category. And that's how you get crews that are hundreds of people to work like a well-oiled machine, is they focus like a laser beam on being amazing in that singular position. And then you get people at the top of their game at every touch point of the entire process of making a movie.
Well, let me ask you, I know from looking at your credits that you have many first AD credits.
Over 100.
Just as first AD?
As well, first and second AD.
First, yeah. And others, of course, as producer, co-producer credits, writer, director credits. What is your favorite role?
Oh, that's a great question. I would probably say directing, but I also love assistant directing. They're very different, so they scratch different itches, if you will.
Yeah.
One's very left brain, one's very right brain, and I love flexing both muscles. I love directing when I'm really passionate about the material.
Yes.
If there's a story I really want to tell, I can't wait to go and tell it. Now, that being said, whether I love the material or not is ironically immaterial for me as an assistant director. Then for me, it becomes about how good it feels to help create a well-oiled machine, and to help lift up other creatives and visionaries. I mean, I have some great friends in this business that are directors, and I love, hey, man, how can I help you make this, the best movie it can be?
Yeah. So if I'm correct, most of your director credits have been in more recent years?
Yeah, I transitioned to directing.
But your AD credits have continued during that time as well.
That's right. Yeah. I AD in between directing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I still ADing. I love it. First ADing. I don't love as much the second ADing. Those are different roles. But no, I love first ADing. And the other thing is, directing my own projects also requires a lot more ramp up time, because it requires developing the material, developing the source, working on the script. And so there's often plenty of time for me while I'm gearing. Like, for example, I'm in pre-production on a feature right now, but it's taken a long time to get through these phases. I can go in AD projects in between, as I continue to develop and work on different elements.
So the project that you are ramping up for right now, is that with Whitestone Entertainment?
That is, yeah.
Tell us
So
about
that's
it.
my own. Yeah,
Okay.
that's it's an action thriller called Coyote Dawn, and I wrote it. I am producing it as well, but I have a producing team on board, and I'm directing it. It's been a script that I've been working on for a long time, and at one point we were actually all geared up and ready to film when COVID happened. And
we hear that word in a lot of stories. A lot of stories.
So unfortunately, a lot of it fell apart, and we had to start all over. It was like Sisyphus. I had to start rolling that boulder back up the hill again. But right now, we're in casting and hopefully shooting probably next summer.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
And when we get to the next half, we're going to talk more about the actual production process from the perspective of first AD, second AD, how it relates to the director, and so on. But before we move on to that, I'd like you to tell us about your training and your consulting.
Yeah, actually, one of the things I did during COVID when, we were all sitting around is I decided to put some of my 30 plus years of experience into a course, an online course on directing. I am a student of filmmaking, always have been. I often say, know enough to know you don't know enough. And we should always continue to be striving to get better at our craft. When I was working for Steven Spielberg, I remember him saying that he continually studied the masters of film and didn't consider himself one of them. I found that ironic because he is certainly one of them, but I love that even somebody at the top of the game continues to try and improve. And so I have had experience working for A-list, top, high-level directors, and I've had experience working with amateurs. And I have learned greatly from both of them because not only can you learn things from a master, but what you learn from people who aren't that experienced is what doesn't work.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And it's ironic. I learn more on those because when you're watching somebody who's been doing it so long that they can do it in their sleep, they make it look easy and you don't really know what's underneath the surface.
Yeah, you don't sometimes even notice what it is that's causing it to work. It just is.
It's almost like sleight of hand. They're so deft at it that it's like, whoa. How come that went so well? You don't even realize. Whereas, when people make mistakes, it's usually pretty obvious. And it's like, whoa, okay, that didn't work so well. I'm going to make sure I don't do that. So I took all of those lessons in total, I've done about 120, 130 projects and almost as many directors. So I've taken all of that experience and I boiled it down into an online course where every step of the directing process is addressed from concept to premiere. And one of the things I've noticed in particular about my own journey of learning directing is that so many people who teach directing or any material or courses on directing, they're very broad strokes. They're very 30,000-foot view. I'll always remember specifically watching Werner Herzog's masterclass on directing. And his number one piece of advice on becoming a great director was to read Icelandic poetry.
Oh.
And he wasn't being funny.
Right, yeah.
Now, that's great. I get it. His point was it puts you in a certain frame of mind. It allows you to, tap into your creative side. I get all that. But what you rarely hear is, what do I do when I first arrive on set?
Yeah.
On my first day of directing. Nobody tells you that. You know what they tell you even less than that? What's the second thing you do when you arrive on set? And so I'd work with a lot of first-time directors, and a lot of times they show up on a film set with a crew just whizzing around them, and they're total deer in the headlights. They just don't understand all of the things that go into directing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I address all of that in my course, Directing Your Movie, from start to finish. It's like, I don't want you to be left hanging. I make sure that I cover all the details, every element, every aspect, because there's a lot of them. So imagine you're visiting a film set as an observer. And as you walk on set, you see a beehive of activity. Electricians are overhead adjusting lights at the gaffer's request, while grips move stands and flags to shape that light for the director of photography. The camera operator adjusts the shot, while the first assistant camera checks their measurements to make sure they have focus. The dolly grip levels the track, while the second AC swaps out lenses. And off to the side, the actors go over their lines with the script supervisor, while the makeup and hair team do last-minute touch-ups, and the prop master hands the actors their props for the scene. The sound mixer rechecks their lavalier mics, while wardrobe goes over and makes sure that the costumes look good. On set, the boom operator checks for shadows, while the second AD gives last-minute instructions to the extras on set, making sure they know their action for the scene. The art department adjusts the set dressing to make sure that the set looks just right. As the first assistant director calls for the actors to take their marks, the producer watches on a nearby monitor. Production assistants fan out to keep the set nice and quiet, and the first AD calls out, "Roll please!" And all the PAs echo, "Rolling!" The slate is called and the shot is marked. The camera is ready, the set is quiet and settled, the actors poised. All are waiting for that one word that sets this whole scene in motion, which marks the beginning of the magical transformation from reality to fantasy. And then the director calls out that magic word, action. This process will take place dozens of times in a single day for several weeks and even months. This is filmmaking. And without a good, strong leader, this is also pure chaos. But the one person who is responsible for taking all that chaos and creating art is the director. I'm Joth Riggs, and I'm a film director. If this situation sounds as exciting to you as it does to me, then directing might be for you. In this online course, you're going to learn what it takes to be a great director. I will take you step by step through the process of directing your movie, from concept to script to production and post-production to the screen. During our journey, you will be given the skills and know-how to be able to walk onto a film set just like the one I described, with confidence and the ability to turn your vision into an amazing film. So come, join me, and let's make magic.
Directing Your Movie with Joth Riggs. 3 modules with over 60 segments covering every step of the directing process. To learn more and purchase this all-inclusive on-demand course, go to FAFFassociation.com and from the menu, choose Online Courses, or find the link in the show notes. And Whitestone Entertainment, they can find that. Is it whitestoneentertainment.com?
Yes, it is.
Awesome,
Yes, it
that's
is.
simple.
Yeah. More importantly, social media is really easier to find me.
Okay.
You can find me on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn as Joth Riggs.
Yeah, awesome. We'll put a link to all of those in the show notes and give people an opportunity to find you and check out your training. Anything you would like to add or final advice that you would like to give our listeners before we finish up this portion of the interview?
Well, I'll just reiterate what I said, which is it's really important to study the craft. It's a very demanding industry, and in order to succeed, you have to excel. You just honestly, you have to be good. If you're not good, you'll fall by the wayside. You won't get the yeses. You won't get people returning your calls. Steve Martin, in my opinion, said it best. He said, you need to be so good they just can't ignore you.
Right.
And so that's my call to action, is for people to not forsake really, truly studying and learning the craft of filmmaking.
That is good advice. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today, and we'll look forward to talking with you more in the next interview.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for listening to the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast. If you've been enjoying this podcast, take a moment to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast player so you don't miss an episode. And if you'd like to support the production of this podcast, you can leave a tip at faffpodcast.com/support. Bringing filmmakers together for faith and family.